Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on the Economic Aid Act. As far as the logistics for today's call, if everybody can please mute your systems, and it's a pretty relaxed environment, so we welcome questions and answers throughout. Please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. I want to introduce today's topic, the COVID-19 guidance for small businesses, the Economic Aid Act. I have a ton of information to share with you today. So we'll get started right away. I want to introduce our panelist, Steve Denny, co-founder and managing member of Innovative Business Advisors. Steve, I'm turning it over to you.
Fantastic, fantastic. And folks, that was a fresh voice on our webinars for the new year. Happy New Year to all of you. And that is Mr. John Vitale. And John is a community banker with BankStar here in Missouri. John, welcome, and thank you very much for jumping in and pinch hitting for Marquita today.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome, folks. Well, John's a fantastic banker. We're gonna talk a little bit more about this. John was kind enough to jump in and help. There's a lot of things to discuss, and John is very familiar with SBA. Their firm does a huge amount of SBA lending, and a lot of these programs are under the purview of SBA. So John's here to assist, and he's going to fulfill that role. Let me give you guys a sense of our agenda for the day. First thing we're going to do is we're going to give an overview of the Economic Aid Act. Now, that is the legislation that Congress passed immediately prior to the Christmas holidays, and the president signed on December 28th, and it became law. So the Economic Aid Act has a whole host of various benefits for businesses, aid programs that are available, quite an expansion to the CARES Act from earlier last year, and many of the features of the CARES Act are extended, and we'll talk about those in more detail. We're going to talk also about, as a business owner and as a potentially a trusted advisor to business owners, what should you be doing right now, this very minute? A lot of the new provisions of this Economic Aid Act are not yet open and in effect, but they will be in the coming days. And I want to stress that, days. So it's not going to be long, but there are things you need to do now to get ready if you want to take advantage of those, and we'll talk about those in detail. And then I also want to highlight that there is so much new information that we have elected to break this up into 4 webinars. Folks, the bill is about, well, the total spending bill and CARES Act revision bill was about 5,593 pages. Most of the COVID Act changes were approximately 600 pages. We've spent the last week or so familiarizing ourselves with those programs, talking to various folks within the government and outside lenders such as John to really get a clear understanding of what's going on. And as always, we're here to provide the facts and hopefully some good guidance that you can use as you take advantage of these aid programs for your business. So with all that said, let's move on. So this is a little bit of an overview. You can see that $1 trillion in additional CARES Act spending was put into play. The vast majority of that is for small business, and there is a huge amount of benefit here for small businesses, and that's going to be the focus of our webinars over the next few weeks. Let me start by just giving a short overview of the Economic Aid Act. And John, I know you've begun to dig through all this information as well, so don't hesitate to jump in.
You bet.
The key headline that everybody's probably seen is that the Paycheck Protection Program is back. It is reopening, and it's reopening for first-time applicants. So if you did not receive a PPP loan in 2020, you will have the opportunity to apply for a PPP loan for the first time here in the ensuing days. The portal is not open yet. SBA will be reopening that, and you will, just like the program before, you will apply for PPP loans directly through local lenders. A real interesting change this time around is that community banks are giving the first preference. So community banks are given the first couple of days. They have the ability to put their applicants into the system before the large regional and national banks. So this is just a ringing endorsement for community banks out there, and the federal government and the lawmakers were very intentful of trying to make sure that small businesses, those businesses of less than 10 employees, had the opportunity to get to the front of the line. So if that happens to describe your business and you did not apply for PPP loan in the past, and it's something that you think you might want to apply for now, I would encourage you to contact a community bank and get to the head of that line. Another key thing is if you did receive a PPP loan in the past, you will now be eligible for a second draw. So there are some specific eligibility requirements. We're going to cover those in much more detail in our next webinar. But if you did have a PPP loan and did use it as described, even if you were forgiven or if you haven't yet been forgiven for that loan, you are still eligible for a second draw. The main eligibility requirement is that your business revenues have to be off by 25% or more. And again, we'll get into the real specifics of a lot of those eligibility requirements in our next webinar as additional rules and guidance comes out from the SBA. But the Congress thought it was very, very successful the first time around, and they've elected to refund it and get it going again for the second time. Another
Steve, if you don't mind, we have one question here real quick, if we can answer it as we go. It says, does the biz owner need to have an established business banking account with the community bank and or bank by which you make the PPP application?
John, I believe the answer to that question is no. Do you agree?
That is absolutely correct, Steve. Yeah, the answer is no.
Yeah, so if particularly if you're a business that's dealing with one of the larger regional or national banks, this is the prime opportunity for you to get out and create a relationship with a local community bank, because you do not have to be one of their customers in order to use them for the loan. Yeah, great question. Another new and very impactful benefit of this second round of the PPP is that there are another 4 allowable expense categories. So things like personal protection equipment and some of the modifications that businesses have had to make in light of the various stay and play orders and shutdowns that have been enforced. There are special new provisions now that allow you to use PPP funds for those type of expenses. So again, tune in next week and we'll get into those in a lot more detail. But just wanted to make sure the audience was aware that it's not just payroll, rent, and utilities. There are now 4 more expense categories that are included in the use of funds for PPP.
Steve, there was one more question here. It talks about it's asking a question about the 25% revenue decrease at any one quarter ?
Yep. So the way the law is written, and this is one of those things that I'm sure we're going to get more information on. So the law says that if that what you need to do is a quarter by quarter comparison of 2019 to 2020. And if your revenues were off by 25% or more in any quarter, you will be eligible. However, there is also a sentence in there that says something to the effect of, if your business was open for 4 quarters in 2019 and was open for 4 quarters in 2020, remember there were some businesses that were deemed essential, and they didn't have to close regardless of the local or state guidelines, but still had a hit to their revenue of 25% or more. There appears to be a provision whereby you're going to use an annual comparison versus a quarter by quarter comparison. And John, my thinking is we probably need to wait for further guidance from the SBA, because I think this is going to be one of the earlier things that they're going to have to clarify.
I agree, and I think you're probably going to answer that a little bit more clear in your next presentation on the 14th.
Yeah, that's certainly our hope. All right, well, I hope that answers their question anyway. Another key thing about PPP is, the whole forgiveness process has now changed, and it's changed for the better for 87% of the borrowers. So folks, 87% of the prior PPP loans were for $150,000 or less. And now, if you were one of those PPP recipients and you have had to get ready to apply for forgiveness but have not yet applied for forgiveness, that process has changed completely. So in essence, you are not going to have to provide a lot of detail, and you're generally going to have a simple one-page, fill in a couple of blanks, make a bunch of certifications, check a bunch of boxes, and sign your name, and the forgiveness application will be much easier. So as our webinar attendees know, there are currently 3 forgiveness applications out there. There is going to be a new 4th forgiveness application. We're waiting on that right now. We know it's going to be one page. We know the form number is form 2483D. Oh, I'm sorry. That's the new second draw application form. But we do know that there are new forms out for these, and they just haven't released what the form looks like yet. So stay tuned. Hopefully we'll have that in our next webinar as well. Another huge change is the revised tax consequences. So in speaking with several of our clients, a lot of them in discussions with their tax professionals in the month of December were really kind of making provisions for multiple scenarios if they took a PPP. Well, now the government has cleared that up. So here's the quick summary, and again, we'll dig into this in more detail in coming webinars. But the income from the PPP is not taxable income to you if you are an independent contractor or a business. So it will not be taxed. You will not receive a 1099 from the SBA or the Department of Treasury that said you received a forgivable tax benefit. The other thing is, they are also allowing you to use the expenses on your tax return that you utilize to justify forgiveness for your PPP. So originally, you guys may remember that the original CARES Act and the way the IRS interpreted that, they said that if you used PPP funds to cover payroll expenses and other expenses in compliance with the law, you could not write off those expenses on your tax filings for your business. Congress changed that. So Congress has intentionally made the PPP a non-taxable event for businesses. So that's a huge consequence. And I'm sure all of your tax professionals are going to be contacting you again to make sure that you fully understand the ramifications of that and get to take full advantage of that. So big change. So that's kind of the headline changes on the Paycheck Protection Program. There are several new provisions in this Economic Aid Act, and we're going to run through a few of those here too. So one of the most interesting is the Live Venue Grant Program. So if you or your business was in the business of providing live events and your primary revenue came from ticket sales, so thus if you were in the theater business, the cinema business, if you had a museum, a concert hall, any other type of live event, or you were a promoter of live events, or even a talent representative specifically for performers, you are now eligible to apply for a Live Venue Grant Program. And this is a brand new program that will be available to you and will give you as a grant basis. So remember, folks, a grant doesn't have to be repaid. You don't have to do anything except apply for it. And if you are granted the grant will be either the lesser of $10 million or 45% of your gross revenues in 2019. So pretty significant grant program. If you think about large movie theaters typically generate somewhere around $5 million a year or so as a business. This could be almost 45% of their revenues that they could get as a grant. So it's pretty significant for that type of industry. If you're in that type of industry, again, this is the time for you to make sure all of your ducks in a row and you're prepared to apply for this grant as quickly as you can. Another significant change is to the employee retention tax credits. I think this was from work with our clients. Not a lot of our clients applied for this and took advantage of it. We're going to talk a lot more about it today. There's a lot here and a lot of benefit that's out there and available to you. So I'm going to gloss over this real quick because we're going to dig into this a little bit more in a few minutes. A significant change is to the economic injury disaster loans as well. So two things here. First off, Congress reappropriated a bunch of money. So the economic injury disaster loans were split into two different types. The traditional disaster loans, which typically were kind of act of God, hurricanes, storms, big fires, that kind of thing. Now they have a whole new category called COVID-19 EIDLs. And every state in the union is deemed a disaster area as it relates to EIDLs. So virtually every business in the country is eligible to apply for one of these. That program is now open again and available for loans. The real significant changes, though, affect the EIDL grants. So those of you that received an EIDL grant and a PPP, if you took the time to actually begin the forgiveness process of your PPP, you discovered that your forgiveness was going to be reduced by the amount of your EIDL grant. Well, the law changed that. This Economic Aid Act that Congress passed in late December changes that. So now your PPP loan will not be reduced by the value of your EIDL grant. A really interesting thing is that Congress even reappropriated money into the EIDL grant programs. And if you received a grant last year of less than $10,000, and for those of you that listened to our webinars and did apply, you may remember that the EIDL grant program ran out of money very, very early. So what happened was they took the remaining funds and they divided that by the applications that were in the system. And they basically said, all of our remaining applicants are going to get $1,000 and potentially up to $1,000 per employee, up to 10 employees, if the money remained. So there were many, many people that received grants of between $1,000 and $10,000. Well, Congress in its infinite wisdom has now said, as part of the Economic Aid Act, that if you receive less than $10,000 as a full grant, you will have the opportunity to reapply for the balance of that $10,000. That Congress's intent was that every business that met the qualifications should have been eligible for the full $10,000. So there's a new pool of money that's going to become available. And if you receive less than $10,000 as a grant, you will have the opportunity to reapply and see if you can get the additional money.
Steve, can we talk a little bit about those that maybe repaid the EIDL or those that haven't yet, and how that affects them?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you're referring to is if you applied for forgiveness and were granted forgiveness, but let's say you had a $10,000 EIDL grant and your forgiveness was reduced by the $10,000?
Yes, sir.
So it's my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, John, it's my understanding that the SBA will automatically be remitting to every lender, so every one of the banks that were the lenders on this, where they have already processed forgiveness applications, where the applications were reduced by the amount of the EIDL grant. My understanding is the SBA is going to automatically send those lenders those grant dollars so that those lenders can then get back to their borrowers and say, your loan is now paid in full. You have no remaining obligation.
That is definitely a hope, Stephen. We're waiting for further guidance on that from the SBA, but certainly that is something that we look forward to. And for the folks on the call, one of the things that we've seen, it's just a huge headache when we went to submit this to the SBA. It came back with the grant, and that you hate giving that feedback that everything is it's approved, but for this you got a partial approval, and there's so much confusion on that. So to be able to go back now and to take that out of the equation, that's absolutely huge for these small businesses out there, and I love that they've made that change.
Yeah, it's going to be huge for the banks too, isn't it? I mean, it allows you guys, as a banker, you get immediately repaid, you get to close the loan, and you get to close the loan with your borrower, right? With both of you leaving the meeting with a smile on your face.
Absolutely. So and one of the things they did is the SB actually changed it effective December 29th. So as lenders go into the portal and updated the information, that idle grant isn't part of the equation anymore. So it's automatic going forward.
So John, are you saying that if I was a borrower, a business owner, and I had given you my application, let's say on January 1st, right? And using the old form, and I had put in my EIDL grant number of $10,000 in the appropriate space, you would have made the adjustment as a banker before you put it into the SBA portal?
The portal actually does it for us when it comes back from the SBA as a forgiveness piece or not, because they know from their side.
Very nice.
But now we don't have to take that into consideration or key that in or anything anymore. So that's a absolutely huge streamlined piece for everybody.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Good to see that. Yeah. So as you can see, folks, lots of changes. And the EIDL program, again, we'll get into that in more detail in the next week or so. The next big thing is the SBA Lending Debt Relief Program. So Congress, in its infinite wisdom, made several significant changes to the SBA program for 2021. And it's absolutely unbelievable. John and I were talking about this earlier. John and I have both been in this business for many years and never seen anything like this. So
absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
Astonishing, Stephen. I still can't believe it.
Yeah, so it really, borrowers are tremendously advantaged, and banks are even advantaged in that banks now have 90% full guarantee on the loan. So there's an awful lot here. We're going to devote a whole webinar to this program, but folks, now is the absolute probably best time in your lifetime to ever think about using SBA lending. It's actually, I believe it's going to be cheaper than commercial lending at this point, John.
Yeah, great.
Phenomenal. So again, we're going to devote a whole program to that. There's a lot to cover in that regard. If there are any questions about that, we'll be happy to answer what we know. We know there's going to be a lot of change. Frankly, we're waiting on some specific guidelines from the SBA in order to fully understand exactly how these changes need to be implemented to make sure that borrowers are able to get all the benefit from these. A couple of things I will tell you. If you're in the hospitality business, hospitality businesses are going to get special preference under the new loan programs. Congress allocated specific hard-hit sectors of the economy. Hospitality is the cornerstone of that, but there are a lot of other things like educational services, oil and gas, apparel manufacturing, many forms of retailing, many forms of passenger transportation, many forms of sightseeing and tourist type of events. So there's a whole range of categories that are going to get special preference here. And there are a lot of special treatment for those things. So, if you're one of those that have suffered the most in your business during this period of time, I have a strong suspicion that you probably will fall into one of these categories, and you will have some pretty incredible terms that are available to you. So stay tuned and be in contact with your bankers, and be in a position where you're prepared to make some moves here. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is the Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. You know, the headline, everybody saw that there was an additional $300 per week added to the unemployment insurance. There are several provisions in there, including a new return to work mechanism. So again, we're going to talk about this in detail in an upcoming webinar, but just do keep in mind that the additional $300 a week, just from a headline perspective, has been extended to March 14th. So that is currently the last week that will apply for the unemployment compensation. Another huge program that is a new addition is the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. And this is designed to provide rental payments and utility payments for those that are in danger of losing their homes. And folks, they extended the eviction moratorium to the end of January, and the emergency rental assistance money, there's $25 billion set aside for this, for people that may have lost their job and are in a position where they cannot make their rent payments. The really interesting part of this is not only can the individual apply, but their landlord can apply on their behalf. So I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to want to take advantage of this. Certainly when we look at the unemployment rolls, there certainly have been a lot of people affected by this pandemic. But Congress has responded to that with $25 billion worth of funds. And again, that's a program we'll talk about a little bit more on a future webinar. And then finally, there are several other smaller programs. The most important one that I want to make sure to mention here is that everybody needs to be aware that we now have the enjoyment again of the 100% deduction for business meals for all food and beverage that's provided by a restaurant. So, you know, whether or not you go to the restaurant or partake, or whether you use Uber Eats or DoorDash or somebody else to deliver it to you, you know, there is a 100% deduction for food and beverage. It's not the 50% deduction. So another one of those sweet little benefits that Congress tucked into the bill that will benefit hopefully the restaurant industry and all of us in business that take folks out and entertain our clients and customers and employees, et cetera. So,
and Steve, I think that is this year and next year. Is that correct?
It is. It's for 2020, 2021, and 2022 as well. You're right.
Nice.
Yeah. So, folks, as you can see, there's an awful lot in this. And again, we're going to devote each of the next 3 webinars specifically to elaborating in each of these things in more detail. But the most important thing we would like you to leave you with is, what can you do right now? So, you know, there are many of these things like the PPP, like the EIDL, like the Housing Assistance Program, where the federal government is having to open new portals and make new sets of rules, new forms, new application process, and those will be rolled out in the next few weeks. But however, right now there is definitely one major program that you can take advantage of, and that is the Employee Retention Tax Credit. Before I get too deep into this, I want to tell you that the rules of this changed as a part of this law. So if you have talked to your accountants about this in the past and your accountant said, no, you're not really eligible for that, or if you've talked to your payroll provider in the past and your payroll provider said, no, you know, you're really not eligible for that, I would strongly encourage you to tee up that conversation again and start it now, because the rules changed on December 28th, and now you probably will be eligible for it. So let me cover exactly what this is and what some of the eligibility requirements are. So first and foremost, this is incredibly unique. This is a refundable and advanceable tax credit for wages that you paid your employees after March 12th of 2020 throughout the end of 2020. And the new law extends that into the first and second quarter of 2021. So there are several changes here. But again, let me talk about refundable. So every business that has employees is providing, has to pay an employer's share of the employee's Social Security taxes. that is the specific tax credit that is available to you, right? So this is a credit against your employer's share of all of the Social Security taxes for the employee. And typically employers will make those tax filings on a monthly basis. Some do it on a bi-monthly basis, some do it on a quarterly basis. But you're doing those regular recurring withholding tax filings, and that's what these credits are based on. So key change is, in the original CARES Act, this employee retention tax credit was only available to those companies that had up to 100 employees. The change that they've made as part of this Economic Aid Act is that they've expanded that to employers that now have 500 or less employees. So dramatic expansion of the eligibility for the employee retention tax credits. You must show a reduction in the gross receipts of your business by greater than 20% to be eligible. So that is one of the eligibility requirements. So first off, they, dramatically expanded the amount of companies that are available to it, but then they put in this caveat that you've got to have a gross receipt hit of 20% or more, which, from what we've seen, is not a huge thing. So hopefully there will be many companies that will apply under this. Another expansion to this is they've said that your group health plan expense that the company covers for your employees can be considered as part of the qualified wage. So it's not just the wage, it's actually the wage plus the group health plan expense that allows you to hit the qualification for your employees. So the big question is, how much money are we talking about here? Before we get to that, I apologize, one other quick thing. In the past, if you took a PPP loan, you were not eligible to have the PPP loan and use the employee retention tax credits. This new law changes that. And this new law says that if you did take a PPP loan in the past, you still can also take advantage of the employee retention tax credits. So that may be the key thing where your tax professional or payroll provider may have said to you, because of the fact you got a PPP loan, you're not eligible for that tax credit. That has now changed, folks. And the nice thing about it is, even though that law changed on December 28th, you can now go back to your previous quarters in 2020 and apply for it. So there's money on the table available for you. So how does that work? Quick caution again, you can't double claim the same wages for both PPP and tax credits. So let's just dig into that a little bit. Let's say that you got a PPP loan in April or May, and you use the PPP loan to cover your payroll cost for 2.5 months, right? So that would have carried you through April, May, potentially even into June. Well, that still leaves you July, August, September, October, November, and December, where you had employee cost and employee withholding against that, right? So the PPP did not cover all of your wages for 2020. So there is certainly going to be some room and eligibility for you in that regard. The original employee retention tax credit for 2020 said that you could take a tax credit of up to $5,000 per employee for the year. So the employee wages were limited to $100,000, and the tax credit was limited to up to $5,000 per employee, right? So if you think about that, $5,000 per employee for 2020, you were probably, you may well have been eligible for some or all of that, depending upon how you use your PPP funds. Now, again, this is going to require some calculation for you. You're going to have to take a look at the payroll periods, what your liabilities were by payroll period, which periods you use the PPP funds for, and then what does that leave as the remaining periods that you can claim the credit for. And the maximum credit that you can receive is $5,000 per employee, but that can still be some pretty good size found money that before this law, you were not even eligible to apply for. Now you can. What's really exciting is what they've done for 2021. So again, as I said earlier, you can go back as an employer and claim the tax credit for 2020. You can look back into prior quarters and make sure that you're getting everything that you're due. And that's what we're strongly recommending, that as an employer, you go do that right now. That's found money, folks. It's just laying on the ground waiting for you to go pick it up. Again, for 2021, what's really exciting is how they've expanded that. So in 2020, it was $5,000 per employee per year. In 2021, they've said it's $14,000 per employee. So this is huge, obviously. And the way they've broken it up is the new law says that you can claim 70% of the qualified wages up to $10,000 per employee per quarter, which means that you are, as an employer, eligible for a tax credit of $7,000 per employee per quarter. So over Q1 and Q2 of 2021, this can mean $14,000. And the practical application of how this works is, let's say your quarterly liability is $5,000 per employee, and you can claim the $7,000 credit. The IRS then sends you a check for the difference, the $2,000. So again, significant money that's just waiting for you to go take advantage of it. Make sure you talk with your payroll providers and your tax professionals. Get all your ducks in a row. Make sure you apply for this appropriately, and the money is available to you. So pretty significant benefit. Wouldn't you agree, John?
This is phenomenal. I can't believe I didn't know too much about this one, honestly, Steve. So I'm glad you enlightened it. So, I mean, folks, like Steve said, there's a lot of changes in this program. So I highly encourage you to get with your CPAs. And honestly, you know, we're in the new year. I would get with them sooner rather than later, because I can tell you they're going to be extremely busy with, you know, the closer we inch of this April 14th deadline.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. So again, you know, I just want to caution you, if your payroll provider or your tax professional says, no, you don't qualify, just say, look, are you sure you're up to speed on the new Economic Aid Act rules and how that changed? And will you please go re-verify and make sure that we're not missing something that we do qualify for? Because it looks like it's going to be available to a lot of folks. And that is, in my talking with various congressional leaders, that is certainly their intent. All right. So that's the one thing, you know, today, if you've got a couple of employees, hopefully I just showed you $10,000 you can pick up for 2020 and another $28,000 that you can pick up immediately in 2021. So that's a pretty good return on your investment of an hour of your time today to be a part of this webinar. Please share this information with other business owners you may know as well, and make sure that that they are engaging with their professionals and making sure that they're taking advantage of what's available to them.
Stephen, I got two questions out here real quick, if you don't mind.
Sure.
One is from a client. She said that she just took a photo of a screenshot of the information you just provided and submitted it to her account. So that's phenomenal. So she's taking the next step and getting things done.
Awesome.
The other one was, can we get a presentation slide? Will the presentation be available as a recorded video? Great presentation, informative and super valuable.
Absolutely. So if they'll go to the YouTube, go to Innovative Business Advisors YouTube channel tomorrow. It'll be posted. In the comments, you'll be able to download a copy of this presentation. In addition to that, we are going to be putting up a copy of the full Coronavirus Economic Aid Act template of the law. So you'll be able to download that as well. If you'd like to read the whole 545 pages yourself, you'll be able to pull that down. And we're also going to attach the SBA's document on the community bank's preference that they're giving on that 48-hour period. John, I think you've seen that flyer as well. So yeah, we'll have that out there as an attachment. And again,
Steve, yeah. Real quick, there was a gentleman out here asking if you can please repeat the YouTube channel.
You go to YouTube, and up in the search bar, just type in Innovative Business Advisors, and that'll take you to our channel. Or you can go to Innovative Business Advisors website and click on the YouTube link, and that'll get you there. And then on our channel, you will see there is a COVID-19 playlist, and this presentation will be part of that playlist. But typically, since it's the most recent one we post, it's the one you see at the top of the channel anyway.
Excellent.
Cool. So hopefully that'll be helpful. We're not finished though, folks. What else do you need to do now? Most importantly, be prepared to act. Those of you that have listened to us, we've been engaged in this discussion since February of last year. We've been holding webinars since March of last year. We have said 1,000 times probably, get your ducks in a row and be prepared to act. Now is that time. You've got a little bit of runway. We know that the federal government, with the change of administrations and all the hoopla that's going on in Washington right now, we know there's a lot of distractions, but Treasury, Small Business Administration, IRS, they're all very actively engaged in getting these programs out and about. So we know that these portals are going to open within a matter of days, and we want to make sure that you guys are ready to act. Along that line, here's some key guidelines. Make sure you're current on all your business operating reports, your profit and loss, your balance sheets, your cash flow statements. Make sure you're current. Make sure your bookkeepers and accountants are keeping you current. You're going to need this information at your fingertips as some of these application windows begin to open up. Also, make sure you're current on all your business tax filings. Even if you're just filing extensions, make sure you're current on those and that you have the documents readily available if you need to produce them. And then finally, do the comparison. If you haven't already, I know you've lived the comparison, but you need to actually spend a few minutes and sit down and do the actual math and the comparison of 2019 to 2020 so that you can be prepared to illustrate the effect of the pandemic on your business. Banks are going to ask for that. The direct grant programs where you're having to apply for the live venue grants, for the EIDL grants, and housing assistance grants, any of those direct grants that are available are going to ask for these things as well. Make sure you've got that information easily accessible. Most importantly, and you've heard me say it several times today, we're honored to have John participate with us today. Community banks are given preference here, so make sure that you reach out to a community banker. You don't have to have a relationship with them, and we will post John's contact information at his bank so that you'll have it. If you don't know a community bank and you're in the St. Louis metro area, John's a great banker to know in that regard. So those are the things that we think you can do just to be in a position where you're prepared to act now. So let me jump into, again, what we're going to cover in the near future. So next week, we're going to do a full hour on PPP loans. We're going to talk about the new guidance and everything that has been laid out about the various rules and eligibility changes and things that you need to know about. Eligibility is a little bit different, and some of the set-asides that are out there and how that works. And there are some special preferences. If you're a business that has less than 10 employees, there are some special set-asides that you need to be aware of. If you are a business that is in a very specific set of industrial segments and hard-hit sectors of the economy, there are some very specific set-asides that you're going to want to know about. And we will bring all of the details to you next week and cover those, so you'll have that information. The forgiveness portion of the PPP loans, as we said, that whole program has changed as well. We know the form number. Hopefully we'll have a copy of the form and we can actually put it up and make sure that everybody's real clear on how to walk through it. We expect it will be out very, very shortly. So next week, don't miss out. It's going to be PPP week, and we'll cover a lot of details on that. The following week, we're going to spend a deep dive and really get into the new SBA lending debt relief programs. And again, Lots of additional details in that regard. We're going to talk a lot about the various fees and rate programs. Short story is that the SBA is waiving their guarantee fees, which is an immediate upfront savings of what, John, 2.5%?
Correct. And that's
Huge.
normally funded into the loan, so the borrower typically has to fund that.
Yeah, and now they're waiving it. Big savings. In addition to that, we'll cover all the rates for the various loan products as well and go through those in detail. And then we'll also talk a bit, again, about special set-aside programs that they've got. There are special loan programs out there for refinancing, job creation, job retention, special set-asides for hard-hit sectors. Lots and lots of information to cover in that regard. And
Steve, I'm assuming you're going to cover the principal and interest payments too for these new SBA as well as the existing ones, right?
Yeah, and let's just tease that a little bit, John. For new borrowers, you get at least 6 months of the first 6 months payment, principal and interest made for you.
Up to $9,000.
Up to $9,000 per month. Per month. So
that's a big tease, Steve, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a pretty big piece, right? So that's 6 times 9 is what, 54?
Big number for small businesses.
$54,000. That's a big number. What's even more astounding than that is special sectors get an additional 5 months on top of that. So there's the potential of up to 11 months of free payments on these loans. Incredible stuff. Folks, you won't want to miss this. Unbelievable. So lots to talk about on that. And then the following week, we're going to cover all the other smaller programs and just do a round robin again on any of the additional updates that may have come out on PPP or the SBA lending programs. There's huge changes here. And, we're just very confident that, like last year, we know the regulatory bodies are not going to be able to give us all this in one big dump. So we're probably going to see lots of rules and notices and guidance and instructions and changes over the course of the next several weeks. Wouldn't you expect, John?
I would fully expect, and just as before, it'll be an ever-evolving process. So stay tuned on a daily basis with us.
Yeah. So, John, before we get ready to wrap up here, I'd like to remind folks, you and I both lived the first round of this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, round one, you were in the bunker for how long?
I was literally sleeping at my desk, waking up, keying in the next load. I remember about midnight, I was texting one of my partners trying to get into the program because the SBA system was having issues, and the very next day it was fixed. And it's all day, every day for weeks on end, keying these things in. But at the end of the day, I tell you, being able to hand that check to that small business and to see the looks on their face, Steve, that was just well worth it. I just got to say, it still gives me goosebumps, man. And I'm looking forward to doing it again.
Yeah, I said it's got to be cool. Then you had the opportunity to do the same thing with forgiveness, and now the cycle is going to repeat itself.
Yes.
But this time, John, community banks like yours are given preference. You guys are going to be flooded.
Yeah, I as I told you before the call, they expect me to go dark there for a little while as I just, in a data entry mode from one to the next to the next. So.
Yeah, well, folks, the point of this is, you guys are forewarned here. You guys now have heard it direct from the horse's mouth, right? So get your stuff together and be prepared to start reaching out to community bankers now if any of these programs are sounding attractive to you, and because they're going to be very, very busy, and you want to make sure that you get in the queue early.
And Steve, to kind of add on to that, we don't know how long the money's going to last. Remember last year when the first round, it went pretty quick, right? So you had others that had to come back, and when it opened up a little bit more to do just again, we don't know. So I guess we'll see this time around.
Yeah, that's one of the key differences is this time around, John, is they have done some of these set asides. So they've done separate buckets for business, different types of business and different sizes of business. So, it might be interesting. You might see like some of the set asides, right, and some of those different types run out early, but the overall fund is still available. And you might see the opposite, right? You might see the overall fund kind of closes up early, but there's still some of the set asides available for some of the smaller businesses. So it's going to be fascinating to see how this one plays out.
Agreed.
All right. Any other questions?
None on the queue, Steve.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, good. All right. Well, John, we've done our work here today.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me, and thanks everybody for attending today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions, or maybe some things that didn't get asked that you think people might want to know about some of the programs we've talked about? Anything you'd add, John?
One of the things that I don't see anybody really talking about, and it has nothing to do with this, is that new $600 per family to be able to donate to 501c3 organizations, and get a ref taken off the top of your tax without having itemized. That's huge. So to be able to get back to all these nonprofits around this greater St. Louis area, make them aware that that's an option, and take advantage of that. My wife and I did last year with the 300 option they had, so we were able to provide a little bit additional, back to the community again. It's all about giving back.
Absolutely, being a good member of the community, right? Yeah.
There is one question just kicked in, Steve.
Sure.
It says, can you talk about your book, You Don't Know, and where to buy it? Is it Kindle, PDF, or hard copy?
So thanks for that question. So that book, we just literally earlier today received the printer's proof. So the process is we've got to go through and make sure the printer's proof is right. And once that is, then we'll be announcing a pre-release on that book in our upcoming webinars. But yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. Long, hard pull to get that out. If you've never written a book, I highly recommend it. But boy, it's not for the faint of heart. As my partner Terry says, it's kind of like being tased.
Nice.
Yeah. But thanks for asking. Whoever posted that question, thanks for asking. Yeah, we'll have more information about that in an upcoming webinar, and more information about the full release and launch of that coming up. So it's going to be exciting. Very good. Any other questions, John?
That was it.
Well, awesome. Well, John, before we go, let's get your full contact information out there. I'm going to post it with the replay, but will you tell our attendees, how can they get in touch with you? What's the phone number, name of your bank, email address, whatever you want to share?
Sure. So again, my name is John Vitale, folks, community banker with Bank Star. I cover both sides of the river, both on the Illinois side where I live, and on the Missouri side, I'm housed out of both the new Sunset Hills location as well as the Pacific, Missouri location. My cell phone number is 618-789-5812, and my direct line to my work, which also rings to my cell, is 636-543-7006. Email would be J V as in Victor, ITALE @bank-star.com.
Awesome.
Looking forward to helping everybody. We handle loans in the greater St. Louis, Southern Illinois market, 2-hour radius. We're a smaller community bank, so we like the local representation.
Yeah, great group of people. Excellent group of people. Can they also find you on LinkedIn and Facebook?
Oh, of course. I've got about 22,000 out there on LinkedIn, so please connect with me if you want. I get a lot of questions, a lot of connections, and I'm a resource of resources. I used to be a SCORE counselor and chapter chair on the Illinois side for about 10 years. So really, really well versed in that small community bank, entrepreneurial spirit kind of world. I'm here to help. I'm a resource.
John's a great resource. Couldn't recommend him highly enough. So excellent, folks. Well, listen, thanks, John. Thank you very much for pinch hitting for Marquita today. Very much appreciate it. Look forward to your continued participation in the future, even though may not see much of you for the next several weeks as you get covered up again with these various programs. But God bless you, my friend. We appreciate it very much. And to our audience as a whole, thank you very much for giving us an hour of your time. We'll look forward to seeing you next week. Hope you guys make it a great day. Take care.
Have a great day, folks. Thanks.